and the thesis presentations have been recorded and uploaded earlier and made available to the committee members and to the audience. Please be aware that the PhD candidates, supervisors, the committee members, and the audience are not present physically and have to speak to be seen by others. Now I will ask each of the members of the committee to present themselves with titles, names, and affiliations. First, I give the word to the first opponent, Professor Frederick Devoe. Yes, Frederick, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Frederick Dufault. I'm a CNRS Research Director in the Laboratory for Signal and System in near Paris.
Yes, thank you very much. Then, please, the second opponent, Dr. Valeria Nomova.
Hi, Dr. Valeria Nomova, Senior Research Scientist from Simula Research Laboratory.
Yes, thank you very much. And myself, my name is Ibrahim Hamid. I'm working as professor at the Department of ICT and Natural Science at NTNU in Ålesund. And in addition of being a member of the assessment committee, I'm also an administrator of the committee. Now I will also introduce the supervisors of the candidate. I will start with the internal main supervisor, Professor Fauzi Sheikh, at Department of Computer Science in NTNU in Gjøvik, Norway. And the external main supervisor, Professor Ola Jakob Ele from Oslo University Hospital, Oslo, Norway. And the co-supervisor, Professor Azzeddin Boghdadi, University of Paris, France. Now, in fact, we have 24 people being presented physically and online. So welcome to everyone. Now, I guess I will ask the candidate to say your name and connect your camera. It's connected. Can you say your name, please?
I'm Congcong Wang, the PhD candidate who will defend today.
Thank you very much. Then I will ask also the principal supervisor, Professor Fauzi, to verify that she is the announced candidate.
Yes, this is Fauzi Sheikh, and I confirm that this is Congcong Wang, the PhD candidate that we are gathered here today for her defense.
Thank you very much. The trial lecture and the thesis presentations are available online. I also wish to ask the main supervisor to testify that the candidate has herself given and made the presentations.
Yes, I certify that I have checked both recordings and it's Congcong who has made them.
Thank you very much. So now I guess it is a time for the trial lecture. The topic of the trial lecture is proposed to be outside the main theme of the thesis, and the committee has agreed about the topic, which is use of deep learning for image and video compression. The committee members had a pre-meeting this morning to discuss the trial lecture, and the committee members had approved the trial lecture. So I guess we will go to the thesis presentation. The thesis presentation also has been uploaded earlier, so we will start the thesis discussion directly. But before this, I want to give some practical information. In the thesis discussion, the opponents will start their questioning of the candidate. When the committee has finished asking questions, we will open for questions from the audience. However, I need to know who will ask questions, so you should use instant messaging to notice me that you have a question to ask later. You can write your questions to me and I will read it loudly, or you may ask the questions directly. So there will be a notice on the PowerPoint slides when it's the time for questions from the audience. Now we will start the thesis discussion, and we will start with the first opponent, Professor Frederick Devoe. So please, welcome.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today for this PhD committee, although the circumstances are a little bit different than usual. So first, I'd like to say that I really enjoyed the work. Both the manuscript is very, very well written and clearly exposed the contribution of the work, and the the presentation, which was previously recorded and made available online, is also very well presented and clearly stated the different contributions with very good illustrations and very good structure. So this was very pleasant to assess this work.
Thank you.
Now, let me go through some questions. So I will copy them in the chat window at the same time in case it's difficult to understand. So let me start with the first question. My first question is, it seems that in the setting which is considered for laparoscopic surgery with stereo vision, the baseline seems to be very small because both cameras are very close to one another. So could you please comment on what is the actual baseline and what are the implications in terms of disparity estimation?
I think there's this equation about the depth and the baseline. Like I think the depth is invoice connect to the value of the baseline, if I remember the equation clearly. Yes, for natural image, the baseline is a little bit bigger compared to laparoscope. So this makes this baseline can influence the accuracy of the surface we get. And I also saw some, there's one paper talk about it. This baseline can introduce some error for this laparoscopic applications. But still, compared to monocular surface reconstruction, stereo laparoscopic can still give a better reconstruction. So yeah, I agree that this baseline can make it the reconstruction error a bit bigger, but still it's so far maybe one of the most promising way to get the surface.
Okay, thank you. My second question is along the same line, also on the settings. I assume that with such small cameras, you may have some lens distortion. Is that the case? And also in your work, do you assume that the views have been rectified before processing?
Because this laparoscopic camera is also very small, actually it has a previous lens distortion. So before we do the stereo matching, we need to undistort it and do the rectification. Actually, we spend quite a lot of time to do the calibration of the camera because also the camera itself is challenging compared to natural image processing. Yes, we need to do the lens distortion and the rectification before we do the stereo matching.
Okay. So my next question is, you have also a step of camera calibration because there could be misalignment in the two views, especially in the vertical axis where you assume that they should be perfectly aligned. And there could also be color mismatch between the two views. So do you have also some pre-processing to take those into account?
I did not consider about the vertical. I assume it's horizontal in the method we implement. But yes, the problem is there when I do the after rectification, it's assumed that the left image and the right image they should be horizontally in the same horizontal line. But I do check the image. Sometimes there's some mismatch. This yeah, I agree with this part. But still, if we consider vertical, then we have another parameter need to estimate. Will make this problem much more difficult. So we assume they are horizontally.
Okay.
And yes, this like the method I'm using, I assume they have the same intensity and the same gradient. Yes, they have some color mismatch between left and right images actually, especially this light source is compared to sunshine is not evenly distributed. So sometimes it's introduced color mismatch even for the 1 pixel. For my paper, I think I did some edge enhancement or contrast enhancement as pro-processing. So far, we only did this contrast enhancement. We did not go into further because also it's a global method. So majority of pixels, the gradient value should still similar. So trying to compensate for this error introduced by the mismatched pixels. Yeah.
Okay. On the slide number 21 of your presentation, where you present the energy function, where you have several terms, taking into account non-local aspects. You have 2 lambda parameters.
Yes.
Can you comment on how do you set those parameters and how they influence the results?
Actually, for these 2 parameters, I set it empirically because this disparity is very small. So I comparably set a larger parameter. I mean, this method is also borrowed from natural image processing. They have some default parameter, but the one I use, I make them bigger because my image is more smaller. Okay, I will share the slides first. Yeah, can you see the slides?
Yeah, it's loading for me.
Yeah, so far I set manually, but I only try to set them once, and I use this little bit bigger parameter for several laparoscope cameras, so the performance is more or less fine. Yes, that's a very nice question, and it's also if we are still working on this global method, that's also a very necessary problem to solve, like how to better, smarter to select the parameter. Actually, for this method, there's a lot of parameters. So it's not that easy to figure out a way to smartly set it. So my way is to comparably make it bigger. So actually, about this parameter setting problem, for the further research, I would like to tend to a deep learning method because then to avoid this parameter setting problem and also the computational speed problem. And also for the cost function itself, because this global method, they have some constraint on the cost function. It should be convex, for example. So all this problem is quite challenging to solve actually. So my preferable way in order to solve my problem, which is more related with like application, I would like to use deep learning in the future. Actually, I also did some work on deep learning already.
Yeah. Okay. To assess the performance for the surface registration, you use the mean absolute error and the Hausdorff distance, which are kind of classical metrics for this purpose, but those metrics still have some limitations. Are they really suitable for this problem, or there could be some other ways which would be better to assess the performance?
I think so far, they are the way we use to for our validation. Like this mean square error is widely used to validate the reconstruction error, and it's also not as sensitive to noise as I think mean square error. And this Hausdorff distance is also widely used for registration of assessment. So that's why we pick these two to assess our results. Yeah, of course, there will be further space to investigate to a better evaluation approach. But so far, I did not go into much in that direction. Also because still we are struggling for have a better situation. So yeah.
Okay. And my next question is about the semantic segmentation and you paper E. So if I understood, you apply it to two existing data sets, but for natural images.
Yes.
One difficulty is to apply it for medical imaging is you need to have labeled data, which is in general difficult, and for medical imaging even more difficult. So can you comment on what size of data sets you will need for training in the medical imaging application?
Like for this method, because I'm lack of data set, so I tested it on natural image, as you said. And actually, after that, we manually label some data set and test it on medical data. I think we depends on the method how much data we need. And for this method, I think we manually label like 1,000 images, and we use these 1,000 images to do fine tuning. I pre-trained the method we propose on the dataset natural images, and I use the labeled medical data to fine tune it. Then we need the comparable less data. And actually the labeled data is from human patients. And this result is from pig. So even it's from pig and the network never see the pig data, the performance actually is very promising. So I think for our method, for our purpose, the data sets like we manually labeled around 1,000, then it's fine. But of course, for laparoscopic images, there's a lot of challenge situation, like the light source. If we are moving the tissues, the light source might be obscured by some parts, so the segmentation result will become very bad. But that's all challenge cases. For this kind of normal view, then I think it's already fine, the performance. And as for the data, I think it's also a promising way trying to synthetic data, like to use GAN or variational autoencoder, this kind of generative models to generate some synthetic data set. And another thing is like actually the label data sets might be it's not a perfect labeled. Maybe I make some mistake during my label. Also, I think the performance of the test data is also very good. I mean, it's also a possible way trying to make some progress in the methodology side to let the method can learn a nice result even from the noisy data set. Let me see.
Okay, thank you. So now my next questions will be on the smoke detection and removal part.
Yeah.
My first question is, you mentioned in the thesis that there are some similarities and differences between image desmoking and image dehazing. Can you comment more on what are the similarities and differences?
I can show the equation here. Well, mainly as from the analysis of this, how the camera capture the smoke image or haze image, I think the main difference. Well, we still follow the similar atmospheric model. So from the analysis, for dehazing, the haze is in all this region, so we don't have this smoke thickness. I mean, the haze thickness is more or less the depth. So that makes it this transmission for dehazing is more related with the depth of the thing. So we can try to estimate according to the depth, and we already have lots of ways to estimate the depth. And another difficult difference is for smoke, because smoke can only appear in some place of the scene, so then we have a difficulty to know the thickness of the smoke. Another difficulty is different is the light source. So for dehazing, the light source is the sunshine and it's very far away from the earth, so we can assume it's quite evenly distributed. So for dehazing work, normally they assume this illuminated part is scalar. What they did, they are trying, for example, they take an image of natural images, and they take the pixel values, which can represent the brightest place, and the value of A is a scalar, and it's not that difficult to get. But for smoke, our light source is is the instrument we put inside the human body. So it's apparently not evenly distributed and it's not scalar. So that's the two main difference. And also, the smoking is a more challenging problem compared to dehazing.
Okay, thank you. My next question is on paper A, on slide 47. You use handcrafted features for the classification of smoke and non-smoke images.
Yeah.
Why not some deep learning approach? Is there any reasons?
Well, the reason for not use deep learning is at that time we did not start deep learning yet. Yeah, that's if you ask me what to do next for this problem, I for sure will recommend to use deep learning because handcrafted feature have its limitations. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's also interesting to do some investigate on handcraft features to know more about this problem itself.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's good to
Yeah.
to do some image processing as well.
Yeah.
Also related to that part, and actually you mentioned it in your perspectives. You use a number of quality metrics to assess performance.
Yeah.
But can you comment on the suitability and how to develop better metrics, which would be more appropriate for this problem?
Yes. The reason we choose this image quality metric is like, for example, theta is designed for dehazing, and dehazing is still similar problem, so we choose this one. And this one is for blur. I mean, dehaze because it can, when the smoke comes to the image, it can reduce the contrast and make the image whitish. So this one is to validate the image quality to see if they have a lot of blur or not. So I think it's also suitable. And this one actually they are to evaluate the edge distorted after dehazing. Oh, this image quality is also proposed for band weather. So it's also a little bit related to our desmoking situation. And this one is to overall validate the contrast of the images. Of course, smoke can reduce a lot of the contrast. So that's why we choose this for image quality metrics. I think it is for now suitable to validate the performance, but for sure they are not a golden standard because even some of them designed for dehazing, but this dehazing and smoking is have some difference as we already talked before. So it would be better to have a better image quality metric, especially designed for desmoking or laparoscopic surgeries. And also another is like the laparoscopic images is for surgeons and for computer vision algorithms. So not for, I mean, for dehazing is for normal humans. Maybe the surgeons, they have more different opinion about how the image quality looks like. So I think it's very, very necessary to develop in that part for the image quality assessment of not only for the smoking, for the enhancement laparoscopic surgery images. I think it's very nice to have this kind of image quality special design for them. And how to develop better metrics, I think there's a lot of work. I mean, it's a very widely researched research topic for natural image processing. So I think the methodologies from that field can also borrowed from here. It's just our observer now become surgeons. And I guess in natural image processing, like learning-based method is also a very promising way now. So maybe we can start to collect some data from the hospital surgeon's opinion and to develop learning-based approaches to have this better image quality metrics.
Okay. My next questions will be more general for all of your work. My first one is on color space. So for some of the approach, you mentioned that you use RGB, but we know that RGB is not the best color space when you want to do image processing. Like computing a Euclidean distance in RGB space is not reflecting the perceptual quality. So what about using some other color space which would be more suitable from a perceptual point of view?
Yeah, majority of the method, I think it also depends on the method. Majority of my method, I'm using color space. Is this question for other method or for specific one paper?
So for some of the papers, you didn't mention the color space, or I missed it. And for some others, you said RGB. My question was more in general for this type of applications.
Yeah.
Do you believe that moving to a better color space would possibly improve the performance?
It's depends. Like for deep learning, I use RGB color spaces because deep learning they will goes to the feature spaces, and no matter you give the RGB or you transfer to another color spaces, I think the learning method will try to figure out the correlation between those channels. So maybe it's not necessary to think about which color space is better. I think the more important one may be how's the quality of the data set, or how's the tricks about training the network. And for other, like for computer vision application purpose, like for my stereo matching work, I think color space, which one is maybe makes no that much difference. Actually, for that method, the first step I did is I transferred to grayscale images because we are doing that part of work for machine vision. They maybe don't care about the color, so the perceptual quality stuff. And actually, but for the smoke detection one, we trying to enhance some detailed information on the luminance channel. We want to keep the color fidelity, because that's images we don't want to destroy the color appearance of it. So I think it's for traditional image enhancement, classical image processing based image enhancement purpose, which designed for human vision. Maybe it's necessary to have a perceptual-based color space to try to not introduce that much color distortion, which is very important. But I think for computer vision applications, maybe the features, this kind of information is more important. So to have other color space, maybe it did not matter that much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last question is also a general one. So when you consider laparoscopic surgery, actually you capture a video sequence, right?
Yeah.
But the method that you have proposed, they're all applied on one image.
Yeah.
And so you don't take into account the temporal axis and the temporal dependency that you could have in your data, which could help on some aspect, especially when you don't have a lot of texture and so on. Maybe the temporal dimensions could help to improve performance. So have you thought about extending your methods to video sequences?
Yes. Well, because I have limited time, so I start with images. For sure, the temporal information is very important. I also mentioned it, I guess, in some of the paper for future work. For no matter for enhancement, for smoke detection, or for segmentation, for stereo matching, the temporal information is all very interesting to explore. I just during my PhD, I don't have time, especially into that field. Yes, I do think about, for example, for the stereo matching, or I think it should be surface reconstruction. My next plan is to use this SLAM-based method, trying to merge to get a bigger surface between different images, because every image has different view to capture the surface, so we can merge those information to get a bigger surface. And for segmentation, of course, the temporal information is very important. Different the mask from the previous frame is very useful for the next one. But for segmentation, I did not extend to temporal. It's also because we don't have this kind of temporal data set. So that's also a challenge. And for smoke, it's also, well, it's very nice to extend to temporal, but still, temporal also introduce more difficulties to collect the data set. So I always start with the single images and trying to extend it later. Yes, I do plan for all the blocks to involve the temporal information.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for the answer. And again, congratulations for the work. It was very interesting and a very good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frederick, and thank you very much, Congcong. I guess now we can go to the second part, the second opponent, Dr. Valeria. So, Dr. Valeria, can you hear me?
Hey, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
I also want to join Frederick and congratulate you on really nice work. It was extremely interesting to read it and know about this extensive amount of work you did. It's very impressive, and yeah, it's a very good contribution. So I'll just I need to copy and paste. So all your methods in all the papers, you show essentially superior performance of your methods. But can you comment about bottlenecks of your methods in general, or what have you encountered? Because the performance was quite impressive in any of the paper you present. You always outperform other methods. Have you observed any bottlenecks in the approaches you proposed?
Yes, of course. There's a lot of space to further improve the method. Because of papers, it's different topics that I will explain by examples. For example, the surface reconstruction work. I talked with Professor Frederick. The parameter selecting, and also especially one problem when we are using for the continual work is the computational speed of this variational method. It's actually quite slow, and it's not easy to further improve the computational speed, like by GPU or other way. It's still a lot of challenge for this method, and also its performance good, but it still have a lot of error when we test it. So for example, to further improve the energy function, all this is make it a lot of challenging part of the proposed method. So it's need a lot of efforts to further improve it actually. And also for the other methods the same. For example, for the desmoking method, is still the classical image processing methods. The computation speed is still another challenging part. although we are trying to use deep learning to further improve this problem, but still deep learning needs a data set. And we propose to use synthetic data set to train the deep learning, but we can clearly see the performance of the deep learning method. It's really good on the synthetic data set because we trained on the data set which have similar distribution. But when it goes to the real data set, which still have some difference compared to the way we make the smoke, so the performance will degrade a lot. So yes, for comparably, our methods is slightly better, but they have a lot of bottlenecks, and we are trying to further improve it for them.
Yeah. And essentially, where these methods stand now? Are they used in real life, or what's needed to bring them to clinics? Because you said that you are part of the European project, and it was one of the work packages. How it will continue, or what will happen to the methods you developed?
All the methods we developed in this thesis is still in the research stage. And because I also closely work with another project, HAPNOW, it's also soft tissue navigation project and is still ongoing. For example, the surface reconstruction method, as I said, is a very important step for navigation. So that method is still used in the hospital. We are trying to still use the method to further push the progress in the registration direction. But still, a lot of efforts needed to be overcome the disadvantage of those methods into clinical. That's still, I think, it's still kind of long way to go. Because it's medical application, also the accuracy is have a very high standard. The robustness is have a very high standard, and yes, and the computational speed, they have also a very high standard. So all this make still a long way to go to clinical.
That was actually was my next general questions, because I have not seen much comments on the computational complexity of the methods.
Yeah.
Can they run in real life, especially the ones for the smoking detection and removal, and for the surface reconstruction?
For the smoke detection, because we are based on handcrafted features, which takes time, so that's why it's not a real time. But because it's a classification problem, so I think deep learning is a much better solution in the future, which can largely improve the computational speed. And for the surface reconstruction, it's also a classical image processing method, and it's a global method. As I just mentioned, is the computational speed is a problem, and we are also trying to solve this problem. Hopefully, actually, we are start to collect some data for deep learning based method. Hopefully, this deep learning can bring some. I think I'm quite optimistic about it. It can bring some computational speed improvement. And for the smoking removal method, the deep learning based method, actually the computation speed is fine now. It's like 25 or 26 FPS on the GPU machine. We did not do that computational evaluation on our method. Is also because this direction is still on a very pre-study to see if this surface-based registration can really help or not on registration. So we did not spend that much time on the computational part. But in the continued work or in a new project, for example, the one I collaborated during my PhD, they do have some researcher trying to improve the algorithms performance by GPU parallelizing them. Yes, I think the work did in this PhD is still focused on the methodology part to investigate the surface-based registration. If this thing can improve the registration accuracy or not, we did not spend that much time on the computational part. so far. Yeah.
It was actually very surprising why you always say that deep learning is faster than variational approaches. So in my understanding, it was always vice versa. Can you comment why, for instance, in paper A, you always say that the global feature method is very slow? Because if you construct deep learning networks, you have to spend a lot of time for training and finding parameters.
First, I say that deep learning is faster is because deep learning, this framework is researched by like the researcher from the world, and there's a lot of GPU-based implementation, which make it faster for testing. For variational method, I would say it's slow because, for example, the method I implemented is on my machine, and if I can make, of course I can make it faster to GPU parallelize it, but that's additional work. For deep learning, I can use this already implemented GPU-based platform. I mean, I say it's faster, it's not compared in the same platform.
Okay.
Yeah, for training a deep learning model, of course, it takes a long time. I use, even like for my segmentation, I even train that data set for almost 1 week. But for testing, because the parameter is is already learned, so it's already fixed, and the computation speed is all these parameter multiple operations, so it will be much faster based on the GPU platform. That's why I say deep learning is faster. I mean, because it's faster without introduce additional work to make it on GPU for the test stage.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not comparable in this sense, but yeah.
Yeah.
I see. Now I just want to go to specific papers and ask questions related to the papers. In particular, in paper A, I'll just write paper A, you use Laplacian of Gaussian for feature detection as your global features.
Yeah.
Can you describe why you use this type of features?
These two features is related with the contrast or edges, and the smoke can degrade the contrast a lot on the images. So this is one motivation why we choose it. And another one actually is this gem and log features plus this feature extraction, this framework, they are used for image quality metric, which means they can detect the quality of the image, there's good or not. And the smoke image and the smoke-free image is also like this. If an image has smoke, that means the image quality is distorted by this smoke. So we also think from this view, both these two views, it's distorts the image quality and is also can evaluate the contrast of the images. Based on this, we choose to use these features.
But can you use only Laplacian features, for instance?
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can only use Laplacian, but I guess the performance may be not as good as both of them. But we did not test it.
But do you know why Laplacian will give worse performance than Laplacian of Gaussian, for instance?
I think Laplace, how to say, because this method is more,
Because Laplacian is a second derivative. Yes, you use it for edge detection.
Yeah.
And then, but it would be very sensitive to the noise, as you said. So you need Gaussian to essentially remove the noise in some sense.
Okay. Yeah. Oh.
But you also mentioned the gradient maps. What's the difference between the Laplacian of Gaussian and gradient maps?
I think gradients is only to take the difference, and Laplacian and Gaussian, I think they have the second derivative and takes something like that according to the equation.
Have you observed the difference in features you extracted with both of these methods?
Sorry?
Difference. Have you observed difference in features extracted by
Laplacian and Gaussian?
By gradient method and Laplacian or Gaussian?
I did not check the gradient maps. I think maybe Laplacian and Gaussian is have more the edges is they can better to detect the edges of the images, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. You also use weighted least square framework. Can you use some other alternative methods for minimization, like iterative reweighted least squares? I don't know. And can you comment on pros and cons? Why have you chosen directly to do weight least squares? And can you comment on computational complexity? But you already did it essentially in your previous answers. So.
Well, we use it because this is also a way to decompose images from some natural image processing. So we borrow the idea from them. And I think to use other optimization method, yes, of course, we can use it. And I did not compare the differences. Well, for me, when I trying to choose which one to use, it depends on the flexibility for me to implement it. Actually, I did not go into deep about which software is better and into deep to compare the different ways about how to solve this cost function. It's yeah, I did not go into deep in that step.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. If we go to paper B, so you use essentially this atmospheric model assumption on the.
Yeah.
Can you comment when the assumption about atmospheric model fails? Because later in the papers you say that in some cases this assumption doesn't hold.
For this model, like what we use in our work, for example, for this model itself, from the equations, actually, for example, I assume the additive part is independent from wavelengths. Actually, it's correlated with the wavelengths. The response might be different, but I assume they are independent. They should be the same for RGB channels. Maybe this is not correct. And also for the how we get these equations, and actually it's there's some underlying about all these parameters under it. And for the assumptions we use, for example, this one, the property of the illumination smooth, or the smoke thickness is smooth. For some case, like I displayed also on the result, sometimes the smoke is not smoothly distributed. So in this kind of case, the method fails. This is the result from our method. Yes, and well, for this atmospheric model, for example, like this method is rely on this natural image atmospheric model. They have another assumptions like the illumination is a scalar, so they also fail to introduce color distortion in the outcome images. And these two images, I think, is also rely on some assumptions. Yeah, I mean, these assumptions is based on our observation, which is not a solid derivative of the mathematical equations. So sometimes it's not follow the assumption we think, then the result will fail, the performance will not that good as the others.
I see. Yeah. You also talk about you use ADMM approach for minimization in this paper.
Yeah.
can you say anything about convergence of the approach? And what do you usually need for convergence when you minimize the functionals using ADMM?
I think for me, for the implementation, like it's like the next iteration difference change smaller than some values, then it's called converge. And for me, for this method, I think within 20 iterations, more or less, they will converge. And so I use two standard. Like if the change is from different iterations is within that range, and the next one is like the maximum iteration times is 20. That's what I set. I set in our method. So we use this to say it converge in our case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you usually do you know what are the assumptions more from formal point of view on convergence of the algorithm? Have you looked at it or not really? Like requirements on the functions you minimize.
I guess it's also like we solve this cost function iteratively. I mean by iteration one, and I think it's like, I guess I did not look into very deep into it. I think it should also like after one, the next value should have the change should be within some threshold, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just curious because it's a variational approach. Can you apply this approach to images which are also smoke-free? And what would be the result? Because now you need to do classification first, and then you apply this algorithm, yes, for smoke removal. What happens if you apply the algorithm to the smoke-free image? Can you think, or can you explain what type of results would be produced?
I think if I use this method on smoke-free images, I think for the contrast, of course, the image will be enhanced because we are subtracting the smoke-veil part of it. And also because the image is a little bit darker after we get the dark attenuation part and we stretch it. I'm not sure if this stretch step will introduce color distortion or not. And although I did not show the smoke-free image result here, but I think this image contain, let's say, quite few smoke. So this is the result we get for the proposed method. So just like I say, it's enhanced, but I guess the color maybe have some distortion, maybe. And also it's become darker because from the equation, we actually subtract these parts out from the original image. Yeah, I did not to apply all the image. If we want to detect the smoke image, it's also because it's if it's a smoke-free image, we don't need to do it. To do the additional, this process also need to compute zero time. So it's better to just like smoke-free image.
How the parameter lambda is changing when the noise level is changing or smoke level is changing?
I think the higher the smoke, the higher. Let me check which is the lambda. Gamma. I did not change it. I mean, I set it. I think I write somewhere in the paper. I can't remember which value. I set it once. I didn't change it. I did not especially do a lot of parameter setting study about it. Also, because I did not do that study, is also because for this kind of image enhancement method, I don't have a golden standard to validate it. I set a different parameter, but I cannot say if it produce a very good, better, or worse result or not, because I don't have a very good validation method to say it. So I will overall set it. I didn't change it for different images.
But I think it would be natural because it contains different smoke levels. It would be natural to consider the different parameters because they are usually dependent on the noise level.
Yes. I think this parameter, especially this one, and also another one, like Yeah, this one. I think it's all very important. This should be further studied in that direction.
Yeah. In paper C, you generate synthetic dataset and your method provides superior results. Are there any cases when you observed worse results from your dehazing method?
You mean this method?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, the table from the paper, the results, it shows it's performed good. That's because it is a deep learning method. And that result is tested on synthetic dataset. So of course, from the number itself, it looks very good. But actually, I only want to say the performance is promising, not much better than the other methods. I think it's still a lot of space to improve. Like, here is not very obvious. Let's see if we show some others. Like when the smoke density is higher and it's not smooth, especially, the performance is not that good actually. Well, it's compared like UNet is better, but I still think the smoke is not that very well removed. We still need to further improve it. But for this case, the smoke is not smooth and the result is not good. It's also because our training dataset, the synthetic datasets we make, the distribution of the smoke is smoother compared to the real smoke scenario.
But do you know which is it, like for large smoke level you get worse performance or less superior performance? Do you have any intuition for which scenarios your method starts to behave worse? Or
little smoke, well, if the smoke distributed smooth, our method always perform better. If the smoke start to not distributed very smooth, the performance is start to degrade, especially when the smoke density is high and it's not smooth. That's the most challenging case. The performance is comparably the worst case.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. For the next paper D, I'm curious, you referred to the Laplacian pyramid you use. I know that it's mainly used for compression of images. Can you motivate why you use it here? And can you say why you don't use any multi-resolution analysis like wavelet decomposition or any other decomposition which brings to the multi-resolution multi-decomposition of the original image? And you already can remove the noise easily without neural networks.
Well, for this method, because it's a deep learning method, so our problem we want to solve use this image pyramid is to compensate for the information loss. And when we do the max pooling during the layer by layer downsampling, it's actually quite similar to the Laplacian pyramid, the downsampling step. So in order to compensate the information loss when we do the downsampling, we want to put the detail bank into the network. So that's why we choose this Laplacian and the Gaussian pyramid, because it's more or less a similar way to lose the information when we build the Gaussian pyramid here compared to the downsampling here. So I think this Laplacian, it can compensate the information loss when we, like this detail is from the detail loss between these two layers. So I think it's more suited to our network. So we use this pyramid.
But have you tried like wavelet decomposition or any other decompositions which provide multi-resolution analysis?
So far we did not try, but that's a very nice, interesting idea to try if this wavelet decomposition can also improve the result or not. That's an interesting idea.
Because I would start with try and wavelet, which is a 5-minute deal, rather than constructing a neural network in general. Starting with something simple is usually a good idea. But
yeah, we can try to see.
Yes. For paper E, I think Frederick already asked. He asked you the training set and how did you generate the training set. The question, and you answered that you would use GAN to generate the training set. Can you elaborate on how you would do that?
I think I will. That's a nice question. To use GAN, I think we also need to collect some data set to train the GAN network to have the ability to learn the distribution of the data set itself. I think the data set we already labeled is not that much enough, like to from scratch to train a network. We can use that to start, and to use that those data to train the GANs to generate some similar data set with ground truth. We have a lot of laparoscopic images without ground truth. So I think the GAN can learn the distribution of the property of these laparoscopic images from this unlabeled data set, and we can try to let it generate the data with label. Then we can use it.
But then you still need to have labeled data, isn't it?
I didn't go to detail about it. If there's notice, if there's any way to generate the data and the label together without input this kind of images. I'm not sure about it.
Yeah. In this paper, since you're essentially dealing with videos and you say that your image changes only slightly from frame by frame, have you thought about considering a model which is used quite a lot in video processing, is where your image is represented as a sum of the sparse component and the background, which is not changing?
We are all only going to think about temporal, but actually we are still focused on images itself at the moment. So as how the technical detail about how to involve temporal, we did not go into deep that much so far.
Okay. So you just take frame by frame without looking in the video?
No. Also because our data set is frame by frame. We did not label the video itself. We pick some data set which is not continuously. Like for 1 second we take one image, or 2 seconds we take one image. So we just did one frame by frame so far.
Okay. Can you comment on the computational costs of the adaptive context encoding which you suggest in this paper?
I did not do the detail about the numbers, but I think it can be a couple of images per second so far.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
It's good.
It also depends on which GPU we are using. And also depends on the image size of this. But still, I think it's faster than traditional like graph cut methods.
Paper F. My question is, how do you minimize the cost function? And can you say a few words what's median filtering strategy to which you refer in your paper?
Yes. Well, as I said, this non-local part is not convex. So from the reference paper, what they did, for the whole how to optimize this cost function, we borrow the idea from optical flow method, where they trying to first decompose the original image into different image scale, and then to do it iteratively. So for the cost function without this non-local term, we can do like what they did. And for like for example, for scale 1, we did the linear equation to get the disparity. And before we go to next step, we use this media filter to filter it. And then the next step, we do the same to make it to the linear equation and get the disparity. And we use media filter to filter it again, and then like this. So the main difference between the original, I can't remember the full name of this method, like fixed point or something linear method. Compared to that original method, we only add this media filter during a different scale when we are trying to go back to the original resolution images. For the implementation view, it's not that difficult to implement it.
Okay. And then how do you deal with this non-spoof, non-local part?
You mean the, sorry?
Yeah, so you said that first you iterate, yes, and then you split it on the smooth part and non-smooth part, or? Let me see. But because for this optical flow method, we are trying to implement the linear equation in different scale. Let's see. For example, they trying to estimate the result on this smallest scale. For example, we get disparity, or we get the disparity, and we use this disparity we get to warp the original image, and we go to this step. And during this step, we still do the mechanism to the linear equation and solve the linear equation. Then we get the disparity again. After we get it, we go to next level. During this, from one level to another level, we add this media filter here. So for implementation view, we only add the media filter during from this step to this step, and this step to this step. So yeah. And the parameter choice, I think Frederick asked you already. Is it fixed?
Yes. For this method, there's a lot of parameters, and the majority of the parameter we use the default one. And for example, the important one, Frederick already mentioned about that one. I choose a bigger one because my image is much more smoother. Yes, and then we use these same parameters to the other data set. Even now, when we do the test in the hospital, we also use the same parameter. I did not further to try into the parameter. Yeah, I think.
Okay, I have just two more questions to the last paper. So you rely in the last paper, G, you essentially take the liver phantom, if I understood correctly, and then you perform initial registration of the phantom.
Yes.
What if the initial registration is slightly wrong? How your method is robust towards this slight misinitialization? I don't know how to say.
Slightly wrong is fine because we still use ICP to do the refinement. Like even we did not do the initial registration after ICP. Well, the error is big here, but still it can put them more or less in a same coordinate. If it's a little bit slightly wrong, but if we put it more or less quite near place, we can still use ICP to refine it. So we can have some tolerance for the error for the
Do you
errors.
have any estimates on this tolerance, or?
Not yet so far.
But have you tested some? Have you tried to essentially create some errors artificially, or you have not tried it?
I have not tried it yet, but yeah, that's a very interesting point. We should try it next time. Yeah, because also this marker is quite obvious, so we did not meet big error which cannot refined by RCP so far. But yes, that's a very nice point.
My last question is essentially, Frederick already asked you that you use two qualities, mean absolute error and Hausdorff distance. Can you explain a bit what Hausdorff distance calculates?
Actually, we use the function from the, I think it's MeshLam directly. So I did not compute it by ourselves.
But can you say the meaning of the Hausdorff distance? What does it calculate?
It's trying to measure the difference between, well, because when we do the registration, still after the 2-point cloud is aligned together, but still for the point cloud, we don't know which one is matched to which one. So, so I think this method is trying to estimate, I think I can't remember the technical detail. It's a bit a long time ago.
But just some equation.
Yeah, I think the equation is like he's trying to evaluate this point cloud's distance by but I can't remember the detail about it. Yeah, but I don't have a very good tutorial about it.
But do you have intuition what's the difference between Hausdorff distance and mean absolute error?
For this mean absolute error, actually it's trying to measure the match the points. Like when we do the ICP, actually it's trying to minimize this point cloud distance. Then we can have this point is matched to that one. So they are compute the match points difference directly. I remember half distance is it's not like this. It's I can't remember the detail, but it's a different way to validate it. And I think personally, I think half distance might be more suitable for this kind of point cloud registration validation. I do have a slides before for it, but I can't remember the detail.
Yeah. Then I think that was my last question, and congratulations again. And yeah, it's a pity that we cannot be physically in one room, but anyways, I think you did a great job with the online.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Thank you, Congcong. I have also one question, please. So it's about the data set, because you generated this synthetic data set. Is it close enough to real smoked images? And when you trained a model using this data set, did you test the model with the real data set?
Yes, for the first question, there's some difference still for the synthetic dataset and the real images. Especially, the synthetic dataset is distributed smoother. The smoke itself is also smoother, and how it added to the image is also showing smoother. Yes, we also test the trained model on real data. Actually, for both of the methods, we test on real data. And we also can observe that because the synthetic dataset have different distribution with the real dataset, so the performance will degrade on real dataset when we change to the real dataset.
Okay, and also, I mean, you did that because because of lack of images. So what about transfer learning? Was it? Have you tried also transfer learning for smoke detection, for example?
We tried transfer learning for desmoking actually. For our first desmoking work, at that time we generate the trained dataset by polynoise and add it linearly to the small free images. And so this linear and added it is not that realistic. And the second issue is at that time, actually, we don't have that much surgical video. So we use transfer learning to fine tune a dehiscing network by this generated dataset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's work. Yes, that's our first work for desmoking. And the next work, we trying to train the model from scratch by more dataset. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Congcong, and congratulations for your PhD thesis. Now it's time for questions from our audience. I got only one question from Professor Yun Young-V Hardberg. So do you hear me? I will just give him the talk.
Yeah.
Just
yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
clearly.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this this presentation and for this the whole session. And it went very well, even if it's different from what we usually do. So I just have one kind of overall question. I mean, you have published your work in several papers, mostly conference papers, one journal paper, as far as I could see. I can imagine that there is more of this work, this good work, that you would wish to publish in journals, and I would also imagine that you are currently working on that or have tried, have submitted this to journals. I wonder whether you could give us some, input on what is the criticism you're receiving from there. What kind of barriers have you seen for publishing more of your work in journals, if you have tried that?
I did not try to publish my work into journals so far. That's a very good point. Merely because well, there's a lot of work. I'm more focused on trying to progress the project view. Like I want to have a better registration result. And also another is my final purpose is to have a better surgery navigation. And no matter which block I'm working on, I would like to validate it under the workflow that is helps for registration or not. But sometimes when I'm working on specific block, the workflow is not set up yet. So I cannot validate this small method under the whole workflow because it's not finished. So I'm more focused on like this the whole workflow work, and then to better investigate more on the individual blocks. So as also PhD is a limited time, so I could not set up the workflow in a very short time and then to try to dig more. But yes, actually I do plan to summarize my work and to further extend them into journals. That's a very, very good point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Also, we have one question from Wang. So, can you hear me, Wang? Yeah.
Yeah. Hello?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Should I turn on the video or not?
Yeah. You can switch your video, please. You can.
To actually say it's indeed me.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm very happy with Congcong and her achievement actually, finally. And my small question actually is in general, our group actually have a lot of interest in generating synthetic data from real data. But right now, within our discussion, actually, we have doubts in the usefulness of using GAN generating synthetic data, actually, because in our discussion, actually, is GAN actually is like two persons fighting each other, and then they become better. And synthetic data is generated alongside that you use trying to enhance the so-called accuracy of that model, the original model. And synthetic data basically is a byproduct generated during the process. And right now, if you actually using GAN to generate the synthetic data, then the byproduct you use it so that you say you claim you actually you have another high quality synthetic data set. I don't think that claim actually true, but I try to explain clearly. Do you get me? Because the idea is that
you think the generated data is not real enough for training the model?
No, it's not. It's just saying data augmentation using GAN somehow does not make sense actually, because the synthetic data generated within the GAN training process actually is a byproduct during that process. So if you kind of extract that synthetic data and then you claim that, because we actually saw some paper on the medical imaging, people claiming that first we use the original real data, and then we use the synthetic data, the same number of synthetic data generated by GAN, and then accuracy got improved. But because you use GAN, so that the GAN method actually help you to improve the accuracy. So my point actually is this is a byproduct. It's not like you actually use the synthetic data to improve the accuracy. It's the GAN method improve the accuracy. Do you somehow understand me?
Yeah. I see. I think it also depends the application, right?
Exactly.
For
example, because we can see that saying if you're generating some fake face just for the visual experience, I get that.
Yeah.
We can look at that face, no problem. But if we say we want to segment the liver, try to improve the segmentation accuracy so that we need more data basically. But again, it's just one method that is internal gaming methodology actually improve the accuracy. It's not because you generated so-called synthetic data using GAN so that you improve the accuracy. So I try to make myself clear.
I think for segmentation, for example, I did not go to detail about it can generate image with ground truth or not. Assume it can generate the image and also can generate the corresponding label. And I use this generate image and the label trying to force another network to learn the function, how to map the input image to a label and GAN's generated data, how they improve the performance, not GAN performance. So I think it depends on the application or how I use the data it's generated. But I did not try it.
Yeah, but in general, that is the general question from our group to the GAN community. Actually, it's not just for you actually, but I just bring up this issue for discussion basically. But again, I congratulate on the impressive achievement in your PhD thesis.
Thank you. And I think except for GAN, like this variational autoencoder is also a generative model. Yeah. Then it's more mathematical modeling.
Yeah, I like those approach better actually.
Yeah, but at least last time when I looked into it, the performance of variational autoencoder is not as good as GAN. But that's mostly 1 year ago. I'm not sure about the performance now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Congcong, for the thesis discussion, and so I guess no more questions from the audience at the moment. So I guess the assessment committee will have a separate meeting now to conclude the results, and we will back here after 10 minutes to announce the results. Thank you for everyone for joining us today, and please we will come back after 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nice presentation, Congcong.
Yeah, well done, Congcong. Congratulations. Very good. Very nice discussion.
Congrats, Congcong, from Ole Jakob here.
Congrats, Congcong. Bra day.
Well done. Very nice.
One hour ago, I actually went back to the office to pick up something, and I didn't know Congcong actually was there, is there.
Oh, you can do that? Like, can I go to the office to pick up
No,
something?
no, no. I asked Marius for permission actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I might also need to do that at some point. Maybe Monday.
As long as you're not in quarantine, I mean, but just be sure, just send an email saying why you need to pick up something, and then
Exactly.
Should be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Don't go with 2 other people. Basically, I think you don't want a group gathering.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think right now the police actually is enforcing some kind of a penalty. But maybe it's just for those people in quarantine, I think.
Yes. If you're supposed to be in quarantine, then you will be fined 20,000 kroner.
Yeah. But I think the fine is a little bit too small.
Yes. And if you cannot pay, you will go to prison only like 40 days.
Yeah. Too bad. This cyber defense that we don't get to enjoy the flutes and drinks and everything.
Yeah.
You say cyber defense. It sounds like some cybersecurity.
Yeah. So digital. It's very difficult to say that actually because those security people basically use up all these electronic terms.
Exactly.
And by the way, have you guys actually considering like doing some data analysis for the virus? You know, the chest CT, you know, that kind of thing. I think right now, even the Prime Minister praised on NTNU saying setting up some funding, you know, innovation projects for helping the pandemic and the virus, so on.
You're the data guy. We just do images, so.
But image is very important. Yeah, image is very important. Yeah. Like the lung CT actually right now the Chinese software, they like Alibaba, they already kind of published their AI algorithm that 15 seconds they can finish the scan of the lung CT.
Oh, so you're actually talking about the images. I thought you were talking about the date, the numbers of the spreading throughout the world, because there's also some interesting model.
Yeah. But we have different threats. So image is one important threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Alibaba doesn't share the data set. In fact, they are selling the product, like the
They're selling? But actually,
Interesting.
I saw they actually sharing all these medical advice and platforms and so on globally actually. So a lot of people can actually go on there and ask for advice. But I don't
Okay,
know
so
whether, yeah.
if you contact them for research purposes, they might share, but they send some like pamphlet kind of thing before with email, and I see that they are kind of making a lot of products, like algorithmic products, like cloud products, and they are selling it.
Oh, they're selling it.
Yeah.
But at least to my impression, Alibaba actually is sharing a lot of these resources online, kind of like free. Well, I didn't dig into the algorithm itself, but it might be.
Okay. Okay.
But at least that means it's doable and it's quite efficient.
Yeah, yeah. If you have
Yeah.
But I am not aware of such kind of cooperation in Norway. Mm.
Actually, the hospital, it seems they are interested, but I don't know about the feasibility of doing such a project though, because the data is so sensitive.
Yeah.
Congcong, are you still there?
Hope so.
Well, probably somewhere, but
Yes,
maybe
yes,
taking
I'm
a break. No,
sorry.
I was just to say I have to check out because children need the computer for
That is so typical right now, you know.
online piano lesson.
Yeah. results, you know.
Yes, I agree. But from paper views, a lot of people are working on it, even in medical. So, and a lot of people claim it has better performance.
Yeah.
But
the committee actually come back, so we should probably shut up. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Congcong, for your presentation today and your defense. We are just waiting for the other committee members to join.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm here, Frederick.
Okay, so Frederick is here. Can you see me also? Or
also here.
Yeah. So Frederick, maybe you can use also your camera. Please switch your camera on.
I don't know why it doesn't seem to turn on.
Okay, and Valeria also. I see myself also black. So okay, now it works. Yes. So. And also Congcong, you can also switch your camera on, please.
My camera is not on.
Yes.
Now yours is on.
Okay, now it's on. Yeah. So Valeria, are you here?
It's on. Yes, I'm here.
Can also maybe. Okay, thank you very much. So now we are at the end of the PhD defense, and the committee has concluded, and they can congratulate Ms. Congcong Wang with a PhD degree. So congratulations for your great work and big effort, and thank you very much for all of you. First to Ms. Congcong Wang for the great work, and also to the assessment committee, but also to all other people who joined and participated in this PhD defense today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the nice discussion.
Congratulations, Congcong.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Congcong. Well done.
So then we're done, right? Yeah.
Very good. So then we have a virtual applause then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Then we can have some virtual drinking party then.
Fauci?
Yes, Ola.
Do you have? Is there a virtual champagne or something?
I think we can have a virtual party even.
Yeah, virtual party is good. Yeah.
And also thank you for the flower.
So that's the real flower?
Yeah, the real one.
That's good.
They are 3D printed.
At least something is real here.
Yeah, it's real.
Well, I hope the PhD degree is also real.
Yeah, that's hope. It is. Okay. I think that's probably it. Or
yeah, I think there is nothing more, Ibrahim, isn't it? This is the procedure. So we can conclude.
Now we just have some forms. PhD form, and we are just filling in and discussing it with the committee members, and we will get it signed soon, and we will send it back to Ingrid.
Okay.
What about the dinner?
You should buy VIPs. We should just have dinner today, everyone in his place, and we can have also this nice meeting together.
Yeah, we can have a virtual dinner party. Yes.
Yeah. So virtual reality.
and showing the dishes, you know, and then you can actually enjoy everyone's dishes.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And I have been recording the PhD defense.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I will send it back to Congcong.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Congratulations, Congcong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great work. And
But this part is not recorded, eh?
yeah.
I think it is recorded.
I stopped recording.